And I look back on my parents' relationship, I look back on my father, and there were things that were part of my father's life after he was saved that I don't know that he ever got a handle on as it related to his relationship with my mother. And so when I came into marriage, there were some things that were different that I didn't want to emulate. My first wife, when she came into marriage, there were some things in her parents' life that she didn't want to emulate my mother particularly. But you know what we both found out? We both found out pretty quick that that's kind of like a computer program. We may have identified things that our parents did that we didn't want to emulate, but in the heat of the battle, shall we say, it's not supposed to be a battle, but say it was a battle, in the heat of the battle, we'd fall back on our pre-program.
The default position.
We default to that's the term I guess in the program. We would default to something that we knew was not right, and we knew was not in the best interest of the relationship, but we did it anyway. And when we did that, then we had to back up and ask each other to forgive the other, one to forgive the other, or the other each to forgive, whatever the case might be. And try to reprogram. You know, we're told in Romans 12:1, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the reprogramming of your mind. That's a paraphrase. By the renewing of your mind. Well, I don't know anything about programming as far as how to do it, but for what little I know about what it is, I would think that sometimes it's a little hard to find the particular thing you need to change, you know. And you change this, and it's connected to that, and this is connected to that, and something else is connected to this. I used to say years ago, when other people were helping me with my computer more than they did now, every time somebody works on my computer, sometimes I would say messes with my computer. You know, they fix one thing, but then they mess something up over here that they didn't realize was connected to it. You know, and then we had to have a second round. But and it's not. That's why I started out by saying it's going to be a supernatural thing. It's going to be a spiritual thing. It's going to have to be done by faith, or we're not going to be able to live that way. Because to start with, we all have an old nature, an Adamic nature that we inherited. We had nothing to do about bringing that about. It's just there with everybody born into this world. And then beyond that, all of the imprinting, if you want to use that term, which is an old term, all of the imprinting that we receive has not been the best. And as I said earlier, if we got a lot of it from television, it was terrible. And movies, it was terrible. It was terrible. But husbands to love their wives as their own body. To love my wife as my own body. Verse 29, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it. Okay, to nourish is to feed it, if it was a plant, to fertilize it. And to cherish it is to value. If you have a very high-priced diamond, for instance, where you maybe keep it in a safe or possibly in a vault at the bank or something. If you have a plant that's really valuable to you, you know, and it's going to freeze, well, you put it in a warm climate or in a hot house or a warm place in the house. Or if you have a plant that's valuable to you and it can't stand the heat and the sun, well, you put a shade over it, or you move it into a shaded area someplace where it'll be taken care of. And that's what we as men do with our own bodies for the most part. And then Paul goes on in verse 30, for we are members of his body, of his flesh, and his bones. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. So he brings it back and ties it to the church. And then he says, nevertheless, that each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself. So what God is telling a wife to do, or telling a wife in the marriage relationship, is to submit to her husband. Adapt to him. Help him do what he's trying to accomplish. And then what he tells the husband to do is love your wife as you love yourself. So if I'm trying to accomplish something, then I need to be trying to accomplish it in a way that makes it easy as possible for my wife. Something that we can work with together maybe, or enjoy together, or whatever the case might be. We live in a culture where people think guys have to have their night out to go chasing around, and gals have to have their night out to go chasing around with other gals, and so somehow they get something out of that they can't get from each other. And if that's really necessary to have a good marriage relationship, sometimes that's indicative that things aren't so good at home. But so if we look at those passages, as I said, A, wives are to submit to the husbands as to the Lord. B, submit as to churches to submit to Christ. C, submit in everything and submit as is fitting to the Lord. D, we move over to the husbands. A, husbands are to love as Christ loved the church. And B, love a giving love and gave himself for the church. And C, to love your wife as your own body. And then D, to nourish and to cherish her. To nourish and cherish her. And I've had the privilege a few times in life, turn to 1 Peter chapter 3, of talking to women that were not saved. In some cases, we're not married. And in some cases, for some reason or another, we would get on this subject, or they would hear me minister on a subject like it, and they really took exception to it. But I have had the opportunity a few times to say, okay, let me share the other side with you. What God says to your husband, if you ever think, I got it. And then to ask, if you had a husband that loved you and nourished you like that, cherished you and nourished you, would that be difficult to submit to? Well, no, that'd be great, but there ain't no guys around like that. Well, there probably aren't many. And those of us who are Christians and should treat our wives that way, I know many that don't do a very good job of it. But that isn't right. And either a husband or a wife who is in a situation where the other isn't what they should be, they can be what they should be. A husband can love his wife as his own body because the love of Christ constrains him to, enables him to, as Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, even though your wife isn't submissive. Now, there's a point where that stops. You can't, if she's going to do something that you don't want her to do, you can't break her legs, and you can't shoot her, and that's not appropriate. And oftentimes a wife decides she wants a divorce, and you can't stop her. There's no way to stop her. But as far as your conduct, your attitude, and even what you say about her, and how you treat her after the fact, can still be consistent with the love of Christ and strengthens. In 1 Peter chapter 3, Peter starts out with a worst case scenario. And he says, wives, verse 1, likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives. So this starts out with the worst case scenario. You're a wife, you've got a husband, and he doesn't obey the word. Maybe he's angry. Maybe he's lazy. Maybe he doesn't believe in the Lord at all. He wants nothing to do with the Bible. You should have never married him in the first place, but you may have married him before you were saved. So here you are. And so And Paul, the Apostle Peter is saying, but there's a possibility that you can win him, that you can by your conduct influence him. And again, I think that it's really important that we understand, okay, we start out, be submissive to him. Well, he's not an unbeliever, so I'm going to do what he wants me to do. Now, wait a minute. That isn't what God says. Well, yeah, but he may want me to do it. I've heard all kinds of hypothetical things. Yeah, he might. He might. But he might not too. And if he did, and you made an appeal to him as a submissive wife, he might not insist. And for a Christian to try to figure out all the possible options that are negative, if they did what pleases the Lord, it's like a person saying, well, if I told the truth, I'd lose my job. Oh, well, so then lie about it, I think. Yeah, nobody wants to lose their job, so just go ahead and lie about it. Well, wait a minute. I know people that have told the truth that they thought would cost them a job. I knew a person that told the truth in a big corporation that cost him a job. Not didn't cost him his total employment with the corporation, but it cost him a position. And he lived long enough to not only get back to that position, but a position above that position, in the position of the guy that dismissed him for not being willing to lie for him. So you can never anticipate what might happen, that our mind and Satan can help us to say, if I let... I had a woman one time tell me, she had been running the family for a good long time. And in the process, she ran the family business. And in the process, she ran it into really bankruptcy. And so we were with her and her family talking about it, and so she admits that, yeah, she was out of place in what she was doing. Yeah, she didn't make bad decisions. Yeah, it was her fault. There were terrible financial situations. And then she looks at me and she says, but would it be all right if I continue to run the thing until we get it out of the hole? I said, what? You got here because you took it away from your husband when you shouldn't have, and you began to run it when you shouldn't have, and you made bad decisions when you shouldn't have, and you got in a financial hole when you wouldn't have needed to, and now you want to know if maybe it will be pleasing to the Lord if you continue to function out of place until you get it back on an even keel. I said, no.
You can always find a reason for not doing the right thing, I guess.
Yeah, we can always find a reason for not doing it right. Yeah, you can justify anything.
Sure.
It's it's like an attorney that's any good. As far as an attorney, he can take and argue a good case for the guilty and the innocent both, depending on which side he gets paid on. But that doesn't make it. Well, when we deal with God, it isn't that way. We've got to come back and deal with the best. Okay, so maybe, again, verse 1, without a word, well, let's do that. Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives. So without a word, they're going to be won by the conduct of their wives. I have, years ago I had some time with a woman, didn't know her before, didn't meet her before the meeting. She was at the meeting, she went to talk to me after the meeting. She was having difficulty with her husband. He wasn't a Christian, and so she tells me all about it. She tells me all the things that she's done, all the things that she's said, all the notes that she's put in his lunchbox, and I said, where'd you get the idea that those were the things that you should do? She said, well, that's what my preacher's been telling me. And I said, well, let's look at 1 Peter chapter 3. So we did. Just what she was being told, and what most people, most women in that situation would be told, is the opposite of what the Scripture says. Without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives. Well, yeah, she's going to set things straight with him. I mean, he wants to go someplace and do something that she doesn't think a Christian ought to do or ought to be, she ain't going. It says, likewise be submissive to your own husbands, even if they don't obey the word, that they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. And we live in a culture where a high percentage of women feel like they're in competition with actresses, movie stars, song singers, one kind of music or another, models of one kind or another, the fashion models in the magazines and catalogs that sell clothes. And they're constantly being told, you need this ring, you need that jewelry, you need this lotion, you need that color, you need this hair, something, you need this, on and on and on. And most women in our culture are slaves. And yet Peter says, and by the way, this is, I've called it, and I think it truly is, the most forgotten health and beauty secret in all the world. This really is. I'm serious. To not let your adornment be outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, putting on apparel. Rather let it be the hidden person of the heart. The beauty that really, that really counts and really helps build relationships also improves your health and your appearance. The hidden person of the heart with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. Is that promoted today on TV? No. Movies? No. Music? Never. I heard somebody that was really excited about something. It was, and I'm not disparaging the people, but on a human level, it was probably quite an achievement. 2 young ladies graduated with a recent class of Rangers. In the what? Rangers and Marines or the Army? Army Rangers. 2 women. And the gal that was a Fox News reporter, she was really excited about it. And she thought she was really giving them a compliment. She said, those are really badass women. Oh yeah, I bet they really showed a gentle and quiet spirit, don't you imagine? Now then, it is conceivable that they could be tough and they could be mean in combat and they could have a gentle and quiet spirit. That is possible, all right. But that's not the message that the accolades and the praise that those 2 women were given as role models for other women. That's not the message that it sends. That's not the message it sends. But rather let it be the hidden person of the heart, the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. So when you look at that, it says, don't let your adorning be. There's lots of women around that can buy better clothes and finer makeup and more jewelry, and they may be better looking, physically speaking, than you are. But really, for any man who has a wife who is adorned with the ornament of a gentle and quiet spirit and that is submissive to him, he's not stupid enough, in most cases. to go.
Henry qualified.
Yeah, because, in most of life, everybody and nobody is not right. Those sentences are inaccurate. But they won't turn their back normally. Because a woman who is what she should be is everything that a man would want as a keeper at home, as a sexual partner, as a encouragement and a helper to him in the things that he's trying to accomplish in life. You can't beat it. And what she will have is a peace of mind It comes from a quiet spirit. And I've had women come to me after I've gone over things like this and said, well, but I can't be quiet. I laugh too loud. I have too much fun. I cut it. No, that isn't what it's talking about. It's talking about quiet in contrast to anxious. Some of us by nature are quiet personalities. Some people don't talk. I know a Christian brother, a little older than I am, that I've known for years. And when I first got married, we spent a lot of time, my first wife and I, in his home before she passed away. In fact, we had our first child. And his wife and my wife, every now and then, would come running in the room to see if we were all right. Because we weren't saying anything. We were both sitting there in a chair rocking. We didn't talk much, and if I didn't have something to say, I didn't talk much. And that's okay. I'm not a quiet personality, but he was. And so, that's okay. But that isn't what he's talking about. You could be sitting there rocking in your chair and stirred up on the inside like only the Lord would know. But it's not to be anxious, not to be tore up by it, not to be fearful of maybe what he's going to do. Whether he's going to invest money, and instead of investing money in the stock market, he wants to invest it in a horse that somebody gave him a tip of. I don't recommend that at all, but a wife that gives a lot of opportunities for a wife to demonstrate a gentle and quiet spirit. And the lack of stress in her life, we live in a culture today where you'd think stress was the enemy of everything. And all kinds of people take all kinds of medications to deal with their stress. When in many cases, you can deal with it very effectively. You just let things go. A lot of things. But the beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, verse 4, which are very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner in former times, holy women trusted in God, also adorned themselves, being submissive to their husbands. So women are given an example. Holy women adorned themselves in the ornament of a gentle and quiet spirit, being submissive to their own husbands, and then a specific person, Sarah, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid. And then he tells her. And if you go back and read the account, God called Abraham. Abraham and Sarah come out. They begin to travel as they go into other countries. And Sarah's not a young chick. And yet she apparently was a very beautiful woman. And Abraham was beautiful enough that Abraham was afraid that as he moved from country to country that somebody would kill him and steal his wife. And so he asked her to lie and tell him that you're my sister. And so she said, I'll be switched if I'll lie for you. Who do you think you are, you big coward? Stand up and fight like a man and defend me. You know what she said? No, not what she said. So they would come into a land, and sure enough, she's seen by the king's servants of some kind, and they say, that guy's got really a beautiful woman, And they check her out, and she says, yeah, I'm his sister. So then what's that mean? You talk about something to be anxious about. And you may say, well, that's not the whole, what you're saying isn't all we're told about Sarah. That's the only time I know of where this endorsement would fit. That's the only time I know. And so, as you would expect, she was taken to become part of the king's harem. But God looked after her, and so they got by that one, and then he did it again. And God looked after her again. But the point is, she was asked to do something that most everybody would say, no, I would never do that if my husband was with me. Even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good, and are not afraid. With any terror. Verse 7 then swings it over again. Peter does the same thing Paul did. Husbands, dwell with them with understanding. dwell with them with understanding. You got to figure them out. That's your responsibility, to try to figure them out to the best of your ability. Somebody told me a joke the other day that I won't tell. About the challenge of understanding the Bible. But anyway, just let me say that should be our commitment. I don't know very many. I have known one or two people that said, "Yeah, I understand my wife. I know my wife." And in some of those cases, I've known that's not true. But anyway, it should be our commitment as husbands. And that means if we're going to understand them and they have something to say, we're going to have to what? Listen. And we're going to have to listen with the intent of what? What?
Of hearing.
Of hearing, okay? With the intent of, with the purpose of what?
Doing something.
Understanding. Yeah, understanding.
My wife just wished me good luck, so.
I
don't know what that's supposed to be.
So, again, it kind of summarized 1 Peter. A, wives, be submissive to your husbands. B, even if he doesn't obey the word. C, you may win him without talk. By the way you live your life, with the incorruptible. Get the incorruptible. You know, I don't care. I don't care how beautiful you are when you're young. You're going to get old. I'm sorry. I showed some of my children, I guess. Maybe my grandchildren, no, I'm not sure. A picture of their mother when we got married. And they couldn't hardly believe it was their mother. Yeah, time doesn't do a lot of favors for us as we grow older, physically speaking. But the fact is that there is an incorruptible adornment. You don't buy it in a bottle, doesn't paint it on, you don't paint it on with a brush. And it's the ornament of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in the sight of God is really worthwhile. And it,
In that word up there in 1, to win the husband, another word could be actually put in be persuaded. And in a sense, by that quiet spirit, you give him a soft, gentle way, not using a 4x4 on his head, like leaving the notes around other things you talk about.
Man looks
And
on the
hanging.
upper appearance.
man, that's on the outward appearance, yeah.
God looks on the heart.
Right.
Yeah.
God also designed the outward appearance. And I think that every man's wife should be beautiful. And if she has, I know, listen, I get my foot in it. But I have known people, that physically speaking, I would not consider them beautiful. But I know that their husbands felt they were beautiful. I have known men that physically speaking, I would not consider them handsome. But I know their wives felt they were handsome.
Physical beauty differs though from culture to culture, too.
That's right, and it differs from time to time. But the point is that what made those people handsome and beautiful in the eyes of each other was the relationship that they had that was enabled by their faith in God. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 7, and I'll close with this. 1 Corinthians 7. We've been talking about submission and headship, and a wife being subject to her husband, and a husband looking after his wife. And this is kind of an interesting passage because he kind of flips some things upside down in a certain area. In verse 1 it says, concerning the things of which you wrote to me. So apparently someone in Corinth, or the church collectively, had written a letter to the Apostle Paul and asked some questions about human sexuality. Concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it's good for a man not to touch a woman. He isn't saying it's good not to shake hands. He isn't saying it's good not to give somebody a brother or sisterly hug. He's talking about the sexual relationship. And that's as far as I'm concerned, a prudish way to say, to be involved sexually, or to have a sexual relationship. And if you doubt that, but I think the context will prove it without any doubt as we move on. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, that's what it's talking about, let each man have his own wife, and each woman have her own husband. So the reason, and I'm going to say this carefully, so don't misunderstand me, it's not the only reason for getting married, but the reason specifically stated in this context for marriage is to avoid immorality, or at least to this point of this context. Now the next expression is to husbands. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her. And I'm sure that it includes kissing her and greeting, and it includes kissing her in the morning when she wakes up, and when you go to work, and those kinds of things. That isn't really what it's talking about. It's talking about the sexual relationship. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. Each what's needed or due the other. Again, you're still focusing on the other person. Not what I have coming, or what I need, or what I want, but it's what does he want, or what does he want, or what does he need, or what does she need, what do they enjoy, or what he enjoys, or what do I enjoy. And then the verse that's kind of interesting in the light of all that we've read about it, the wife does not have authority over his own body. The wife does not have authority over her own body. But the husband does. Oh, yeah, well, sure, the husband is the head. Yeah, well, wait. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. So what's he saying? He's saying in the sexual relationship, it's important that each of you realize she has some claim on my body, and for her to realize he has some claim on my body. And the next word, the next sentence in the 5th verse is, do not deprive one another. Do not deprive one another. Except with consent for a time. So if it's mutually agreeable for a time, and the purpose given for that would be to give yourselves to fasting and prayer, with the intent of coming together again. And the reason